I almost went blind because we moved into a house infested with toxic black mold, and we escaped the place something like 8 days after moving in.
A week after moving into a dream home, Miriam and I are now evacuating.
But we're both still dealing with the effects that this had on our health.
Mold is scary, and it's definitely not something you want to mess around with.
I'm still battling with some of the symptoms a year and a half later, and also still detecting mold-related metabolites on my organic acids test.
Too often, the symptoms of mold exposure are attributed to the wrong causes, and as a result, we consider mold only after exploring all other options. Mold poisoning is a very common issue, so the symptoms should be common knowledge. The whole thing is even worse if you're sensitive or allergic to mold, like Andri. And in that case, you need to be even more aware of your environment and the mold in your house. But there are more ways that you can be exposed to mycotoxins than black patches on your walls.
So almost 2 years ago now, we decided to move to Portugal. It was a pretty spontaneous decision, and within a month we had our bags packed and we were on a flight to Lisbon.
After a while, we managed to find a nice house by the ocean, freshly renovated and everything, so you can imagine our excitement moving in. We move in, everything is great, and we're happy. But after a few days, something just started to feel a bit off.
Over the course of the week, I started developing some mycotoxin or like mold toxicity symptoms. I'm like a canary in the coal mine with these things, so I feel them really early. I was certain there was mold in the house somewhere. So a week after moving into a dream home, Miriam and I are now evacuating.
So we packed up our essentials and ran. Trust us when we say that mold in general isn't something to be taken lightly. When exposed, some people develop symptoms almost immediately. For others, it might take weeks or even months to notice anything. But what's certain is that you are being harmed because no one is immune to mold. Before moving, we did our homework, talked to friends who lived there, read blogs, articles, and studied the housing market. But what we missed is that Portugal has very outdated building practices. Couple that with humidity issues and you have a recipe for disaster.
Fortunately, it didn't take us long to figure out what was going on. We were in and out in 8 days. It turned out that the kitchen wall behind the cabinets and appliances and the upstairs bathroom were both completely infested with toxic black mold. And all the experts that we talked to unanimously said that we only have one option: to move out, because there's really nothing else to do.
And as it turns out, Andri is actually allergic to mold. He started showing symptoms almost immediately after being exposed. But it took me more than 2 weeks until my symptoms hit, and we had already moved out by then. My symptoms were similar, yet somewhat different. Like Andri, I felt foggy and couldn't focus on work for more than 5 minutes. And it was scary and pretty stressful because you feel like you're not all here and you're not sure if the feeling is going to last forever.
Symptoms of mold toxicity manifest differently for everyone, and as a result, all too often people unknowingly live in moldy houses for months or even years. For some people, it might take more time to start noticing anything, since all species of mold are not equally as aggressive. In that case, you can be sure that when you do start noticing symptoms, the damage will already be so much more severe.
Sometime before or after the house we moved into was renovated, a pipe had burst, and the house had extensive water damage.
Today, we got the owner and we got the builders and like the representatives of the owner, everyone in here. And as soon as they moved the first piece of furniture, there was like black mold on the walls everywhere. Then they started removing the flooring. There was like mold under the flooring, and that's just like one corner they opened up.
But this wasn't handled properly, and both our realtor and the landlord were hiding the fact. So we had a lot of fun and legal letters being sent around to get our deposit and prepaid rent back, while also having to look for a new place and deal with the serious symptoms at the same time.
The symptoms of mold exposure are wide-ranging, to say the least, and as mentioned, they manifest differently for everyone. So you might experience symptoms like bloating, chronic digestive issues, multiple food sensitivities, sudden or inexplicable weight gain, chronic asthma, sinus congestion, chronic sore throat, chronic anxiety or even depression, persistent attention deficit, foggy brain or poor recall, persistent fatigue, fatigue, regular loose stool and constipation, poor sleep quality, chronic pain like headaches and muscle pain, sensitivity to fragrances and chemical smells, low libido, difficult or irregular periods or difficult menopause, and swollen glands or joints. It's a very long list that seems to cover every symptom out there. But there's also a crucial life lesson here. If you ever experience new or unfamiliar symptoms after a change in your environment, like moving into a new home, office, or having your home suffer water damage, in that case, the symptoms are very likely related to this change in your environment.
Way too often we overlook our environment when trying to figure out our symptoms. Mold is a hidden danger lurking in many homes, and it's also often overlooked until it's too late. If you have visible mold in your home, for most small sources, you can remove it yourself, like from your fridge or washing machine, with some hydrogen peroxide or even some bleach. But you have to be careful and protect yourself while doing so, as when you're fiddling with mold, it's going to release a bunch more spores in the air, and we don't want that. If you have larger areas that are infested, or if it's in walls, you might need professional help. However, the problem is that very often remediation efforts leave the space off worse than it was before because of the hard chemicals they use. And sometimes getting rid of the mold completely is impossible unless you break down the house and rebuild, which was the case for us.
Well, we moved out, but if the landlord now wanted to fix the house, then they would have to break it down and rebuild. But if you do suspect that you've been exposed to mold and you want to know more about how to deal with it, check out this video next. I'm sorry I covered your face with the video.